Hey everybody, welcome back to Winnemac Hockey, where today we are continuing our off-season analysis series featuring the LA Kings, who have the 8th overall pick in the draft. As always, I am joined by my two partners in crime, in Jake the Snake Armstrong and Matt the Brat Cleveland. If you are new to the channel, please consider hitting that subscribe button for more NHL discussions, analysis, and even some awesome street hockey content. Alright, let's hop into the video. Alright, LA fans and other hockey fans around the world, so the Kings are in a pretty good situation despite how their record looked last season. They finished 21, 28, and 7, which is not ideal, but they have a lot of talent on that roster, and they're very young. However, they only have $14.6 million in cap space, so there's not a whole lot that they can do when it comes to bringing in some veteran players, unless they utilize the trade market. But let's kind of talk about that current roster, Jake, and tell me what you think about them. Are they going to be up and coming, or are they still going to need a couple years to develop?
All right, so personally, I would say give it a couple more years, let Alex Turcotte and Quinton Byfield get some more development time. But it seems like they're ready to go now because they just made that trade to get Victor Arvidsson, which is a great trade. So if their prospects are ready, then I think that this team could make a run. Just looking at the roster, they've got Arvidsson locked up for 3 more seasons at $4.25 million. Adrian Kempe was great for him last year, $2 million for another season, and then he's an RFA. Brendan Lemieux was a great acquisition. What do these Cup teams have that's getting it done? It's that grit. And Brendan Lemieux is that gritty guy that I think the New York Rangers were missing when Tom Wilson ragdolled their entire team. Austin Wagner was also another young guy, but he hasn't really been. He's not the missing piece. I'll get back to him later. Anze Kopitar is the veteran. He's been on the team for a while now. You kind of want him to win a cup, but he's getting older. He's still making $10 million for 3 more seasons. So maybe they're trying to do the run now while they still have him. Alex Iafallo is pretty good. Dustin Brown is a guy who needs to go because he had 17 goals, 14 assists, 31 points last year. But he's making $6 million for another season. He's old, and I think the young guys should really be kicking him out of the lineup. On defense, Drew Doughty didn't have a terrible year. 8 goals, 26 assists, 34 points in 56 games. He was a minus 14, but it's the LA Kings. But that $11 million contract hurts. Other than him, my personal favorite guy on their back end is Matt Roy. 2 goals, 8 assists, 10 points in 44 games, and he was a +0 on LA. So not a bad season for him. In net, we have some issues because Jonathan Quick is making 5.8 for 2 more seasons. So you're sort of stuck with him. Cal Peterson is the goalie of the future. He had a .911 save percentage last year on the Kings, so he can keep the puck out. I like him. Altogether, if they can get their prospects playing well, and their veterans like Doughty and Kopitar also carry their weight, I think they've got a shot at the playoffs.
Yeah, I just want to point out too, Jake, that you mentioned the defenseman and Doughty having a minus 14 and Roy having a 0. As a team, they were minus 27, and you have to consider that Doughty was on the ice a lot. So being a negative 14 on a team that was negative 27 is not all that bad. Matt, let's come to you though. What are your thoughts on the current LA roster? Do you think they have a good future coming ahead of them?
Well, being in a division like the Pacific definitely helps their case for finding a playoff spot there. They're definitely going to be in the running next year, and I think they're one of the best penalty killing teams in the league. I mean, penalty kill percentage wise, they're in the top 5, so that just shows how good they are at stopping the puck, and plus they have a really good future stud there at net in Cal Peterson. And their power play was 19th in the league. It's not great, but then you add a guy like Victor Arvidsson, a guy that they got in the trade, really good sniper, can really help that power play, and you got to keep guys like Athanasiou. And this team has definitely got a lot going for them. It's just about they're kind of tight against the cap, so they're not going to be able to make a ton of moves, but it's really going to come down to they just need the players that's in-house to really perform for them. And I think the young guys really need to come out and be great off the bat, or at least be serviceable to where they can give them at least third and second line minutes, sometimes fourth line minutes if they're not too great. But I think they definitely have a chance to do something here in the Pacific, that's for sure.
Yeah, so Matt, you mentioned the salary cap, and that is obviously an issue for every single team. But LA especially, for where they're at in the league standings, having $14 million in cap space is not a lot. So let's talk about the RFAs and UFAs and how important they're going to be. And if you guys think that they should re-sign a couple of them, or, let's talk about that a little bit. Jake, let's come to you first. RFAs, UFAs, who stays, who goes?
All right, they've got a couple of guys that are sort of like bring them back, sure. But the big one here, in my opinion, is Andreas Athanasiou. Had 10 goals and 13 assists, 23 points in 47 games, and he was a -6. So he's not terrible defensively either. But this is a guy, he's only 26 years old, and he was at one point supposed to be like a top 6 guy. I think he can still do that. He's still developing. And if he gets the right group around him, watch out for Andreas Athanasiou, because he is the real deal.
Yeah, so Matt, what do you think about Jake's thoughts, and then what UFAs and RFAs do you think are coming back to the Kings after this offseason?
Well, I agree with him completely there with Athanasiou. I think he's a huge part of this team. And with the team being not that great offensively, more so a defensive team, you need those players that are good on offense to stay. And that's what they need to find a way to bring him in. And also, I look at a guy like Trevor Moore. He's a young guy, about only 26 years old. I mean, he had a pretty good season for them. He's playing low minutes, but I think he's another guy you could bring in definitely for cheap. He's more of a defensive guy on that bottom end, kind of fits their scheme. Other than that, there's really not much for them to bring back, and they really don't have much cap to bring them back, so it kind of works out well for them in that aspect.
Yeah, so we're talking about Athanasiou, and he has been left unprotected, though, by the Kings. So we got to hope there that Seattle doesn't come up and take him, even though he is a RFA. So do you guys think Seattle might take a guy like him, though, as we're a few hours away from the expansion draft? Jake, you want to take this one?
I think Athanasiou would be a great fit on any team. Based on leaks and things, it might go the other way. But if I was the Seattle GM, I'd take Athanasiou, and I give him top 6 minutes and watch him put up 30 goals for me.
Matt, you were about to say something. My apologies for cutting you off there. Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with him. I think it's a clear choice for Seattle, even though a lot of the rumors and almost confirmed things say otherwise. I think if you're Seattle, it's definitely a guy you got to look at. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. All right, so if you bring a guy like him back, that's not going to leave you with a whole lot of salary cap left of that $14 million available. Do you guys see LA trying to bring anybody in free agency, maybe a couple of low-end guys that aren't going to cost a whole lot? Matt, let's come back to you.
Well, I actually have something that's a bit ambitious, but I think after you hear my trade situation to kind of clear up cap space, you'll see otherwise. I think with how many young guys they have on the back end, even though they're kind of limited when it comes to the salary cap, I think bringing in a good offensive defenseman could really help their power play. And I think they could definitely be in. I know they're kind of a dark horse, so they could definitely try to be in on the Dougie Hamilton sweepstakes. I think being an LA team sure helps. You're going to have to pay him a lot of money, and maybe that kind of draws it away with having a guy like Drew Doughty already on the roster, making as much money as he does. I think if you had a combo of Drew Doughty and Dougie Hamilton on your first line pairing defenseman, that is a tough combo to go against, and the Pacific would be running scared. So being an LA team, it gives you a little bit of a bonus because of the warm weather, just a great place to play, a great arena there in the Staples Center. I think that they do have a chance. They just have to find a way to clear cap, and I think when we talk about trades, they have a way to.
Okay, all right. So I was about ready to say that if they were going to bring in a guy like him, they would have to consider their future players and look at the salary cap down the road. So they probably would have to clear some cap via the trade market. But before we hop into that, Jake, let's come over to you. Do you think that the Kings are going to pursue anyone in free agency?
I personally didn't really see them playing a big role in free agency. I think Matt's, he is ambitious, but if they could get Dougie Hamilton, I think that would be a great fit for their defense. It could probably only happen if they don't get Jack Eichel, which I know they were interested in. But it seems like Buffalo wants about 15 first-round picks and your firstborn child to get Jack Eichel. So I think they've moved things over to more Sam Reinhart. But if they don't end up getting Eichel, I think Dougie Hamilton could be a good option to spend that money on.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because I think every team is eyeballing Dougie Hamilton right now. I don't know of a team that's not. So, Matt, since you mentioned that you have a way of clearing the cap and making this dream become a reality for LA Kings fans, what is the trade proposal that you have that they could potentially make and shed some of that salary cap?
Well, we talked about it earlier. Jake did, and a guy that he thought they should let go. Well, I actually have them letting go of him, and that's a guy in Dustin Brown. I think you capitalize on the value that he has right now, being a 17-goal scorer. Probably the best value you're going to get for him right now. And I think you ship him off to either two teams. You ship him off to either Winnipeg for a fourth-round pick in return. I think that's fair value for him. Or you ship him off to, if Colorado doesn't bring back Brandon Saad and doesn't bring back Landeskog and they need another goal scorer, I think you can ship him off there and it'd work out for both teams. And I think in that aspect, you won't have, in either situation, if Colorado doesn't bring back the players that I mentioned, they'll have enough cap space where you won't have to retain salary cap there. And again, basing off his value and where he'll play on that team, it'll work out for them. And then with Winnipeg, they're sitting at a pretty good spot when it comes to salary cap anyway. And this would be a way for them to get a leg up there in the Central. I think they'd be willing to do that as well. So getting that $5.8 million off the books, I think is enough, along with the $14 million that they have right now, to where they can be a bigger player in free agency.
I like that, especially, shedding the cap, getting rid of an old guy, and trying to bring in someone to revamp that defense along with Drew Doughty. That's a scary move. Jake, what do you think? Is this possible?
I don't care how many Stanley Cups Dustin Brown wins. He will always be known as the water bottle meme to me. He did have 17 goals and 14 assists and 31 points in 49 games played this year. That's solid numbers. I think Matt's right. Any team that's trying to make a push could use him. But all I know is if you don't throw in that meme in this video, Dom, you're getting a dislike on the video.
All right, that's a lot of pressure. You'll have to send it to me, and I'll try to make that happen. So let's talk about the value. Matt, you said a fourth-round pick. Jake, do you think that'd be enough to get it done, or do you think LA would want to prospect a higher pick? What do you think?
Oh, no, I think they'd just be happy to get rid of him.
Okay, shedding the cap for fourth-round pick. All right, sweet. All right, so hey, Jake, did you have any trade options or ideas along with Matt's?
All right, so nothing too specific here, but I do think they keep pursuing Sam Reinhart. I think he'd be a great player for them. He had 25 goals, 15 assists, 40 points. And, that's pretty good for a shortened season in Buffalo. So he's a great player, could be an offensive threat for him. I think you pair Sam Reinhart with Athanasiou, and they have a great season together. In terms of players they might be giving up, first off, it's going to take probably a first-round pick. Second, I think somebody like Austin Wagner, I mentioned earlier, isn't very young anymore. I think he's like 27, only put up 4 goals, 4 assists. He's not great, but he's a roster player. Somebody like Wagner and maybe Alex Iafallo, who had 13 goals, 17 assists, 30 points in 55 games played. So he's a decent player. 2 decent roster players and maybe a first-round pick to get Sam Reinhart. I think that's about what it would take to get it done.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair value. Matt, what do you think?
I think that makes sense. I mean, when you're looking at a team like this, you look at the roster that they have, other than Andres Kopitar and Dustin Brown, their oldest forward there is 28 years old, and the likes of Arvidsson, who they just traded for. So they're a pretty young team when it comes to that front part. So I think adding a young piece like that would definitely fit into their team, and it'd fit in for the push to the playoffs as well.
All right, so hey, let's transition here into the future, looking towards next season. Say they make these moves that we talked about, whether that's getting Dougie Hamilton or trading for Sam Reinhart. Where do you guys think the Kings are going to end up? And then we'll talk about who we think is going to be their most valuable player next season. Jake, let's come over to you. Where do you think the Kings finish over in the Pacific this year?
I'm looking at around 3rd place. I think that's a very, very weak division. And the Kings have made really good moves. I think we have to praise their GM for bringing in somebody like Victor Arvidsson, and even the depth guys like Lemieux. Something that Connor McDavid didn't have when he came into the league was somebody to like stand up for him and keep the goons off his back. That's how he became Collar McBroken, because he just got beat up. And having Brendan Lemieux to stand up for guys like Quentin Byfield and Alex Turcotte, that's going to help amplify their performance, and I think that combination is going to get them way up there in the Pacific Division.
All right, Matt, where do you think LA ends up in the Pacific?
I have them around fourth place, I think, is like just base spot, but I would not be shocked at all if they're battling Edmonton for a second spot there. I think they're a team that's going to be in the playoff hunt. I think there's a team that's up and coming, really, as long as they get good coaching to go along with this good roster that played well last year. They could definitely be the hint of things. And like I said earlier, the Pacific isn't very strong, so this is their moment to pounce to get into a playoff spot.
I like your guys' thoughts. You guys might tell me I'm a moron, but I have them sitting at 6. But don't sit there and cringe at me yet, all right? The Pacific, very shaky. Vancouver could come back and play like they did in 2019. Calgary, I have sitting right above LA, but I don't know. I think that the young guys in LA have to prove it this season. So I have them at 6th. However, like you guys said, the Pacific being as shaky as it is, I mean, they very well could finish up there at 3rd and fight for that playoff spot. I just think it really depends on their young guys. And as of right now, I don't know if they're going to be able to make a playoff spot with that young team. But they very well could prove me wrong. So if you guys think I'm an idiot, that's okay. That's fair. But that's where I think they're going to end up. But let's transition to the MVP candidate for next year. Who you guys think is going to break out for the LA Kings? Like I said, it's going to rely on the young talent to come together, but some of those veterans have leadership and they've shown what they can do. So, Jake, let's go over to you. Who do you think is going to be the most valuable player? Do you see a young guy or one of the vets taking this?
So I think that Victor Arvidsson is going to be up there. Like, he is a great acquisition. I think he is probably the more stable pick for their MVP, but I think a slightly riskier pick here is somebody like Alex Turcotte, who did great in the World Juniors, and he's got somebody, like I've mentioned it over and over again because it's that important. He has Brendan Lemieux to stand up for him. I think he can really break out. He's going to be put in the right environment, and I think Alex Turcotte could be the difference maker on that team.
All right, I like those picks. Matt, how about you? What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm going to stick with the man in net and not Jonathan Quick. I'm going with Cal Peterson. This dude had a really great season last year. Jake reiterated his stats earlier, the 911 save percentage, the 2.89 goal against average, and he's just scratching the surface of what he's going to be in the NHL. I think if they're battling for a playoff spot with the type of stats that he was doing this year to add on to that and have even better stats next year, I think he could be a guy who could be in that Vezina conversation. It's kind of crazy to think, but he had that good of a year last year, and if he takes a step up from that, I think he could be a seriously good goalie for this team. He's going to back end a really good team, and he's going to be that guy. I think he's going to be their top player.
Nice. I think both of those picks between you two very much could happen. I think those guys are going to be the very key components of LA's success next season. For me personally, I think, Matt, if the LA Kings are able to meet your ambitious expectations and bring in Dougie Hamilton, I think he will be the most valuable player for them. And Jake, if they go your route and actually acquire Sam Reinhart, I think he can be the most valuable player for them. I think that, he has a lot of talent to offer. He's been playing for the Buffalo Sabres and has still played really well for them. So if he comes into a system like LA, I think he's going to shine. However, if I have to pick from one of the current players, Jake, I think I'm in agreement with you. I think Victor Arvidsson is a great player, great trade. I think he's going to shine for them next season. So as we wrap up this video, guys, do you have any other thoughts, comments, or concerns?
I just want to say that out of all the teams we've done so far, you can look at all those videos. This might be the first team that actually has a shot at making the playoffs.
I think that's a good point. I think the other team that I would say has a chance would be Detroit, but that would take a couple more moves, I think, from Steve Yzerman over there. But I think Detroit has a bright future as well. But I think you're right with the Pacific Division being the way it is. I think LA has quite the chance. Matt, what do you think?
I totally agree. I think they're going to be a team that's going to be – the Staples Center is going to be rocking this year. I can tell you that.
That is for sure. Might have to get me an LA Kings jersey. I don't have one of those yet, but slowly but surely adding to the collection. All right, guys. Well, if there are no other concerns, that's what we have for you today. And LA Kings fans, I hope you enjoyed this video. I think we kind of pumped up this season for you guys. Your guys' future is bright. Your GM's doing a heck of a job over there, and it's going to be really exciting to see how you guys put it all together next season. All right, thank you guys for tuning in to Winnemac Hockey. Again, consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video and give us a thumbs up. We'll see you next time on Winnemac Attack Hockey.